Okay, so let's jump right into the news. So obviously, what I have to say about political anger has some bearing on what just happened in Alexandria, Virginia. So here is what we now know. We know that the shooter, the alleged shooter, and I only say alleged for legal reasons, his name is James T. Hodgkinson. He's identified by the Washington Post, 66 years old. And here's what the Washington Post reports. They say the shooter at the GOP congressional baseball practice this morning is James T. Hodgkinson of Belleville, Illinois. According to law enforcement officials, Hodgkinson, 66, owns a home inspection business. His home inspection license expired in November 2016 and was not renewed, according to state records. He was charged in April 2006 with battery and aiding damage to a motor vehicle, so he's got a history of some violence as well. Here's some of the media coverage of the congressional baseball practice shooting. This clip 19.
So there were 2 bits of gunfire, and how long did they last?
Pop, 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 and it was returned, then another bunch. It went on for a while. I would say at least 4 to 5 minutes, starting and stopping. So it could have been someone was trying to catch the guy that was shooting at him, or he was beginning to take out everybody, my thinking was, in the YMCA.
You said you ran right into the house. You felt concerned. Kind of elaborate on what was going through your mind. I'm sure your heart was racing.
If you're in your yard mowing the lawn and there's shots up the street, you don't want to get shot just to mow your grass.
Okay, so it's just horrifying. They say 50 to 60 shots were fired. Senator Rand Paul was there. He said if the police had not been there, there would have definitely been a massacre. Apparently, Capitol Police were there because Steve Scalise, who was shot, he's the House Majority Whip, he had brought some security with him, and the Capitol Police ended up shooting the guy and apparently killing him. This piece of crap, James Hodgkinson, is indeed dead. Here's Rand Paul talking about what it would have been. This clip 20. If we can play it.
In terms of the circumstances as they played out in Alexandria right now, we are hearing more details from Mo Brooks, that Alabama Republican who was among those present today at that baseball practice. He said this morning in an interview of the shooter, he was going after elected officials. It sure as heck wasn't an accident. And Rand Paul, the Kentucky senator who was also there, said who have been warming up in a batting cage during this practice. He was just heaping praise on the Capitol Police, who he says happened to be there because the Majority Whip, Steve Scalise, was there. He said had they not been there, it would have been a massacre. This morning, Rand Paul and others are praising the police.
Okay, so we can skip that. Mo Brooks, as a congressman on the scene, he also described the shooting. And then there was another GOP representative who said that before the shooting, this guy, Hodgkinson, walked up to him and asked him if Democrats or Republicans were playing on the field. So, yes, there was political motivation. This would fall under the category of political terrorism. Here is a representative describing this murder or attempted murder, because I don't think anyone has died yet except for the shooter, asking whether it was Republicans or Democrats practicing on the field.
What I'd like to talk to you is give you an overview of what took place. And we received a call of an active shooter, shots fired, 0709, 9 minutes after 7 this morning, here at the park on Monroe, Simpson Park. At that time, there was a practice team event with a baseball team of folks that were representing some folks on the Hill. We were there within 3 minutes. We do know that officers from the Office of Capitol Police, as well as 3 officers.
Okay, so terrific response by Capitol Police. They get there within 3 to 5 minutes. Governor Terry McAuliffe, who is the governor of Virginia, he, of course, came out immediately with the Democratic talking points. Whenever there's a situation like this, the Democratic talking point is it must be the guns. Now, according to Rand Paul, if there's nobody there with a gun, then this guy just mows everybody down, and he can do it at his leisure. I mean, he's literally walking through a crowded area. There are kids there, and he's just killing people. Governor Terry McAuliffe, however, he says this is really just the result of too many guns. This is clip 23.
Do you think anything more needs to do to protect politicians?
Well, let me say this. I think we need to do more to protect all of our citizens. I have long advocated, this is not what today is about, but there are too many guns on the street. We lose 93 million Americans a day to gun violence. I mean, I've long talked about this. Background
okay,
checks,
he's an insane person. We don't lose 93 million Americans a day. And again, it was a good guy with a gun who stopped the bad guy with a gun, not gun control laws. There are background checks. This guy was from Illinois, where there's heavy gun control, and we don't know where he got the gun. We don't know if he went through a background check. He apparently, as I say, had a couple of run-ins with the law. He was charged with battery and aiding damage to a motor vehicle, so he clearly had some issues. He probably shouldn't have gotten a gun if there was a background check, so we will see what is revealed. But again, the Democrats always jump there instead of of jumping to a bad person decided to go off. And here's what we know about Hodgkinson. Hodgkinson hated Trump. Here's something else that we know about Hodgkinson. Hodgkinson loved Bernie Sanders. Okay, so we have all sorts of graphics from his Facebook page. His Facebook page, its key image is a picture of Bernie Sanders in the Uncle Sam outfit. He's got pages up that he's been tweeting, that he's been putting out on his Facebook page, talking about how corporations write bills and Congress is bribed until it becomes a law. Here's something that he just said, quote, I want to say, this was 2 days ago, I want to say, Mr. President, for being an a-hole, you are truly the biggest a-hole we have ever had in the Oval Office. Okay, same day, make America great again, resign. And then he puts out on Facebook a graphic that says, all in all, it's just another bleep in the wall picture of Trump with his hand against the Western Wall. It says, same day, Trump is guilty and should go to prison for treason. He has, on June 11th, please read and pass on. And there's a quote from Alternate, stop fighting over who created the world and fight against the people who are destroying it. In March, he put out on his Facebook page, Trump is a traitor. Trump has destroyed our democracy. It's time to destroy Trump and company. So this is leading to the same conversation that we always have in the country when a domestic, politically motivated terrorist decides to go on a rampage. And we've seen this already in Portland. The guy who was responsible for murdering a couple of people with a knife was a Bernie Sanders supporter. Democrats have always tried to claim that Republicans are responsible whenever there is a violent crime. They tried to claim that Jared Loughner, who's legitimately an insane person, was responsible for killing Gabby Giffords because of Sarah Palin for some odd reason. They tried to claim the Oklahoma City bombing was because of talk radio. Going all the way back to the 1960s, JFK and his administration, after his death, tried to claim that it was the toxic political rhetoric and the climate against JFK that led to his assassination, not a communist stooge who shot JFK because he was a communist. Again, there's always this conversation that happens. And I think that there are several points that need to be made here. One, I am not going to blame Bernie Sanders for the attempted murder of these Congress people. I'm not. He uses inflammatory rhetoric. Terry McAuliffe himself uses inflammatory rhetoric. Here's an example. Yesterday, there's McAuliffe going out there about gun control. Clip one, he was talking about how there are treasonous Americans, presumably inside the Trump administration, coordinating with Russia to steal the election.
Do you think that there are Americans who committed treason?
I think as we get into this, it seems to me that Russia was actively involved in destabilizing our democracy.
But were there American people helping?
Somebody, I believe, had to give them a roadmap. Somewhere in this, somebody was directing the Russians on whose names to use, what impact a certain people sending a memo would have on the American electorate. I mean, they just didn't sit over in some cubicle over there somewhere in Moscow and figure this out.
Okay, so there he is basically humoring the idea that somebody has committed treason. The penalty for treason under the Constitution of the United States is death. Is that because Terry McAuliffe actually wants some nutcase to go and shoot up a bunch of people? No, I don't think so. This is heated political rhetoric. It's pretty normal. So I want to point out a couple. So let's start with this. Just because Bernie Sanders says inflammatory things does not make him responsible for what this guy did any more than the fact that Donald Trump says inflammatory things would make him responsible if somebody had gone and done this to Democrats. Okay, that's not how political rhetoric works in the country. I judge whether political rhetoric is directly responsible for violence if the political rhetoric directly tells people to commit acts of violence. That's when political rhetoric is responsible for violence. Otherwise, we're going to get into very dicey territory where we decide to shut down free speech because it could promote violence. That's the direction everybody likes to move. Right? Barack Obama did a whole campaign-style rally after the Gabby Giffords shooting in which he blamed toxic political rhetoric from the right, and he blamed lack of gun control, and then he suggested that basically the right and its toxicity was responsible in some way for all of this. I'm not going to do that because I thought it was immoral when Obama did it. I think it's immoral when anybody does it. The way that you can connect rhetoric and ideology with actual violence is if that rhetoric and ideology is actually calling for violence. So, for example, radical Islamic jihadism actually calls for violence. Governing Sharia law is a call for actual violence against human beings. And one of the ways that you can judge whether the rhetoric is actually calling for violence is whether this is a rare exception to a general rule or whether it is a widespread belief, a wide-held belief, and a lot of people are participating in it. So terrorism is a widespread thing. It's happening all over the world. There are regimes that are participating in it. There are regimes that are funding it. And there are large swaths of the population in the radical Muslim world and in the just fundamentalist Muslim world that are supportive of the general beliefs of some of the terrorists, including the use of violence. Okay, that is not the case here. I'm not seeing the upsurge from the left saying, I'm so glad that this guy went out and shot a bunch of Republican Congress people. So I'm not going to equate American leftists with jihadists. And just because the left does this to the right doesn't mean it's okay for us to do it. Just because the Southern Poverty Law Center tries to connect every act by a loon who once listened to Rush Limbaugh with Rush Limbaugh's views does not mean that I'm going to participate in the same thing because I think it's disgusting when they do it. So it'd be equally disgusting when we do it. And I want to talk about, though, I do want to talk about when rhetoric is responsible for creating a toxic climate and what that actually means generally. So I've talked about when rhetoric is directly responsible for violence. I'll talk about in a second when it's sort of indirectly responsible for creating a climate that creates more of these sort of isolated events. But before I do that, I want to say thank you to our sponsors over at Tracker. So if you lose your wallet, if you lose your phone, if you lose your keys, and if it happens all the time, this is why you need Tracker. I lose my wallet, phone, and keys all the time, or at least I did until we got the Tracker. The Tracker is a coin-sized device that you stick on your keys, you stick on your wallet, you stick in your bags. You can implement the program on your phone, and then you can use the Tracker app to find everything in seconds. And if you lose your phone, well, then you press the button on your Tracker device or even ask your Alexa, and the phone will start ringing even if it is on silent. Tracker has the largest crowd locate network in the world, so it can find your items even if they are miles away. Tracker.com is awesome. It's helped save my marriage because we lose stuff all the time. Right now, if you go to Tracker.com, TRACKR.com, and use that promo code Ben, you save 20% on any Tracker package. You can save 20% on any Tracker package when you go to Tracker.com and use that promo code Ben. As you can see, the devices are exactly the size of a quarter, and they are not only unobtrusive, they are highly, highly useful. So you never have to lose your stuff again. Tracker.com, and use that promo code Ben so that they know that we sent you. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about the idea that left rhetoric, Terry McAuliffe's rhetoric, Bernie Sanders' rhetoric, I'm not going to blame that rhetoric for this guy going out and doing stuff. And by the way, I'm not going to blame even Kathy Griffin's rhetoric. I'm not going to say that Kathy Griffin is responsible for this guy going out and shooting Congress people, because I don't think Kathy Griffin told this guy to go out and shoot Congress people or said, I think it's okay if you go out and shoot Congress people. I think she's an idiot. I think she's a fool. If the Secret Service actually thought that she was advocating assassination, they would have arrested her. Right? It is not a crime to say gauche things. A lot of people today on the right are going to do the Shakespeare in the Park routine where Julius Caesar is played by Trump and assassinated, that this is what led to the events of today. I'm not going to do that because I think it's gross when the left does that. Yeah, I think that there can be a badly interpreted play. I think that there can be a play that I would think crosses some lines without saying that it is directly responsible for the violence. Now, it is true that as rhetoric and violent rhetoric escalates on both sides of the political aisle, and it's been ignored on the left by the media, the right is pointing it out with regard to Trump, and it is certainly true. The Kathy Griffin stuff, the Shakespeare in the Park stuff. A toxic political climate is not going to make rational people go out and shoot Congress people, but it is going to have an outsized impact on what we in the legal field call somebody with an eggshell skull, right? The idea that somebody is right on the verge, and now the climate has become so toxic that he's going to go nuts and start shooting people. The toxic political climate is indirectly responsible for this. So what does that suggest? It suggests everybody should ratchet this stuff down a little bit. We keep hearing the war rhetoric from the left. We keep hearing the treason, the resist rhetoric from the left. We keep hearing the war rhetoric from the right. And the response has been from people on both sides of the aisle to keep upping the ante. Well, if they use a tactic, why can't we use a tactic? If they use violent rhetoric, why can't we use violent rhetoric? If the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, blames the right every time something bad happens, why can't we do that too? Why can't we just keep making the rhetoric? Why can't we just keep making everything more and more and more toxic? Okay, listen, I am not shy when it comes to using rhetoric. If you've ever seen the show before, if you've ever seen any of my videos, I'm not shy about speaking what I believe to be the truth, and I'm not even shy about using harsh language. But when it comes to advocacy of political violence or giving the go-ahead to anything that remotely hints at political violence, that's where we all need to take a step back, not because it's going to lead to widespread battles in the streets, although we have seen some of that with Antifa, which actually is a violent terrorist group. Not only have we, but it's going to have an impact if the entire culture goes toxic. If the entire culture just becomes a war of all against all, then that doesn't mean it's going to turn into open warfare in the streets, but it does mean that more nutty people who are right on the brink are going to be pushed over the line into doing something truly awful and truly violent. So here's my recommendation. Everybody should take it down a notch. Try to decide whether your anger is justified before you vent your anger. Try to decide whether something is worth tweeting before you tweet it. Try to decide whether that Facebook post talking about how you wish Trump would just die already is worth doing if you're on the left. And if you're on the right, try not to respond by saying, I hope you die, right? Let's all just take it down a notch, because I don't think that either you or the guy you're posting with is going to go and shoot somebody, but I think that somebody who's reading might be impacted in outsized fashion. Now, I don't make decisions, and I don't think anybody needs to make decisions about their personal behavior based on the nutcase who could go nuts. But I also think it's kind of immoral to talk in these ways as a general rule. So I think that we should all take a step back in that sort of notion. And again, I'm not saying we shouldn't use harsh language. I mean, for goodness sake, I've signed books punched back twice as hard using the Obama rhetoric with regard to political battles. But that is not the same thing as openly advocating for violence against people on the other side of the aisle. Obviously, meaning things figuratively is not a good thing. And I think that people, including me, should maybe take a step back on all of this. And so in other words, instead of blaming Bernie Sanders, instead of blaming Donald Trump for people who are bad doing bad things, I think we should recognize it's a free country. People should say what they want to say. But people should also take care that maybe it's not a great thing if we decide to inject the toxicity of violence into our rhetoric at every available turn. And it's been just upped dramatically in recent years. Okay, so I now want to turn to more toxicity in our political culture. But you're going to have to go over to dailywire.com right now because we're going to discuss the Sessions hearing, what actually happened yesterday in the Sessions hearing. Big nothing burger. We're going to talk about why the Democrats were over their skis on it. But you have to go to dailywire.com and subscribe right now if you want that. Dailywire.com. $8 a month gets you a subscription to dailywire.com. You can be part of the mailbag, which we'll be doing on Friday. If you have questions, by the way, for my pops, my dad is going to be stopping by, and we're going to talk about our brand new book. And if you have questions for him about me, about anything else, then send us those questions. We will do a mailbag with my father on Friday, so you can subscribe for that. Or if you want an annual subscription, you get a free signed copy of that book that I wrote with my dad, Say It So, all about the 2005 White Sox baseball season and fathers and sons in baseball. It's a really fun book, great Father's Day gift, and I will sign it for you so you get it for free. And that's if you get an annual subscription. If you just want to listen later, go over to iTunes or SoundCloud and make sure that you leave us a review and subscribe. We always appreciate it. We are the largest conservative podcast in the nation.